first speaker is John Andrews. He's with the Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And he's going to be discussing SCERP plans, or small community emergency response plans. And he's also going to be talking about tabletop exercise examples and I think even more than that. So I hope I captured that well, John. So thank you for joining us. Then we're also really grateful to have JoAnn Scordino joining us. She's a longtime ITEP collaborator and friend. JoAnn is a mitigation community planner with FEMA Region 9 and has a huge amount of experience with hazard mitigation planning. And so she'll be sharing some thoughts with us on that. And then finally, hey, yay, JoAnn. Finally, we're really excited to have Jesse Johnson joining us. Jesse is a grants management specialist with FEMA Region 9. And he also, we had a tribal hazard mitigation planning cohort before this cohort, and he joined us to talk about the development. He helped, or I think you were the lead on developing the Morongo Band of Mission Indians tribal hazard mitigation plan, so has some good experience there, but now joins us with a FEMA hat as to talk about their grants. And Jesse, I think you also mentioned that you might be able to talk about technical assistance that is available to tribes. So, so many thanks to all of our speakers. Before I turn it over to you, John, Julie had wanted to mention these 4 phases of emergency management: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And this is a FEMA diagram. And so we're going to be talking about various aspects of these during the call today. Response is kind of what happens immediately after a disaster occurs. And then we're also going to be talking about that mitigation piece, which is kind of taking a longer term view and trying to prevent harm from happening in the first place. And I think with that, yes, John, can I turn it over to you, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to try and share this presentation here.
Great.
And
looks fabulous. Thank you.
all right, you can see the welcome screen there.
Yes, we can see your first slide.
Okay, great. So my name is John Andrews. I am the Small Community Emergency Response Plan, or SCERP, coordinator. I work in the All Hazards Resilience Planning team for the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management with the state of Alaska. So the first slide I have here, community resilience as defined by the National Research Council is: resilience is the ability to prepare and plan for, respond to, recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. Enhanced resilience allows better anticipation of disasters and better planning to reduce disaster losses rather than waiting for an event to occur and paying for it afterward. So when we look at preparedness, the responsibility for emergency planning starts with individuals and heads of households, and that includes having a family emergency plan, having a like a 7-day emergency supply kit, being ready to handle things within your realm. And then as disasters and emergencies grow and they become too large to handle within our own household, we look to the community for help. When it's too large for the community, they look to the borough or region, if applicable, or the state. And then when the state's resources are exhausted, they look to the nation for help. So rather than immediately looking to the state or the federal government for help, this aligns more with Alaska's constitutional policy of maximum self-government and kind of building on individuals taking responsibility. So we have a circle here for preparedness. It starts with planning. So we're going to develop a plan. and we're going to assess the hazards and emergencies that apply to us within our communities. And we're going to then prepare that plan through training, through exercising, through evaluating if the plan meets what we are anticipating as an emergency or disaster for us. Then when a disaster happens, we're going to respond to it. We're going to implement that plan. Once we get through the initial response, we turn to recovery. And then as we move out of recovery and things are kind of behind us, we're going to review the plan and we're going to adapt it. And we're going to learn from what we just went through and how we handled it. And we're going to change our plan to better meet the needs in the future. So within the state of Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, we have the different divisions. So I work in plans with the All Hazards Resiliency team. We also have community planning and mitigation. We have preparedness, the training exercises and outreach. They're the ones that coordinate the incident command system training. They coordinate the exercises. So once we complete a SCERP, we can put together an exercise, like a tabletop exercise, and we can walk through it and try to address those shortfalls in the plan before we actually have to put it into practice. We have our operations section, which counts the SCOC. Once there is a disaster and you contact the SCOC, if it's a state or federally declared disaster, we will all come down to the SCOC and help staff the positions in there to respond to the disaster. So that office is smaller for most of the time, most of the year. And then when necessary, that office can actually expand and we all fill second roles to help out down there. We also have the disaster assistance branch, and that includes public assistance and individual assistance. And we'll talk a little more about those later on. So first we're going to plan. There are two pre-disaster planning documents, the Hazard Mitigation Plan and the SCERP, Small Community Emergency Response Plan. The Hazard Mitigation Plan, it's a long-term plan to keep existing facilities from being impacted by future events. So within the name mitigation, we're trying to mitigate the effects of a disaster or an emergency. They're multi-jurisdictional plans, and they are required to apply for federal disaster funding. So there is some grant funding that's tied to those. Within the SCERP, they're an immediate response action in a disaster. So this is a plan that you would fill out beforehand and then hopefully not need it until a disaster happens, and then you would pull it off the shelf and put it into play. It's a checklist for community leaders, so it's not something to be distributed freely amongst the community. And it is recommended for communities less than 2,000 people. So again, within the name, small community. So we are focusing on less than 2,000 people within a community. Once they get larger than that, then we look at a different plan. And there's not any funding tied to these. So the state does cover the cost of developing the plan, distributing the plan, printing it, but there is no grant money associated with it. So the SCERP, as I mentioned, it's a checklist for disaster response. It's a standard format, and it is customized for each community with community-led input. So we are not coming in telling the community how to run things. The community knows how to run things within their community the best. They also know what resources they have. So we seek out the information from the community and then input it into the SCERP. So again, it's standardized so that a SCERP for one community closely matches a SCERP for another community as far as the format goes. And then it is a process for informing the community of critical locations, contacts, and resources. So it does list out contacts within the community. It lists out the shelters, medical facilities, also the community leaders who have decided who's going to be in the incident command structure. So like I just mentioned, within the incident command structure, we'll break that down a little bit here in a minute. It is a flip book. So you open it up, the first page you see has the State Emergency Operations Center, the contact information for them. There is somebody to answer the phone 24 hours a day within that office. And then as you go through the disaster, you can flip the pages. And so we start with, if you know that there is a disaster that's coming, if you have an advanced warning, or if within the first 4 hours, 12 hours, 24, 48, and 72. And so it will kind of take you through the disaster as you hit these different milestones. You can turn the page and it outlines what you should be doing as a community, who you should be contacting, kind of just a way to follow through with it instead of not knowing what to do. So it also has sheltering and evacuation information, and it's useful for just a decision tool to decide whether we're going to shelter within the community or evacuate within or away from the community. So depending on the disaster, how bad it is, what kind of disaster it is, maybe there's some different options there. For instance, maybe a wildfire would require a different evacuation than a tsunami. And then towards the end of it, it does have contact information for those local, regional, state, and federal resources. What can it offer to me as a community member? It's an all hazards approach. So it's not just designed for one type of disaster. There are not multiple different versions of a SCERP for different disasters. It's useful to be, it can be used for multiple different kinds of disasters. So whether it's power outages, wildfires, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, you can apply the same concepts to all of those in how the disaster is managed. It runs off of the incident command structure, which is used for everything from disasters like this to parades and party planning on a large scale. So again, I said it was the cost was covered by the state. We will produce and distribute 7 binders to the community, and then within the SCERP, there is it's outlined where those binders are going to go by the community. So they will decide who is going to be the holder of the binders and where they're going to be. It offers improved coordination between local, tribal, and state entities in handling a disaster response. So again, there's only one SCERP for a community, and it allows different parts of the community to come together. So whether it is the city, whether it's the tribe, it allows you to bring everybody in as a community and function together as a community. They're pretty straightforward to set up. Really, it only takes 1 or 2 community planning meetings to decide who's going to fill what roles, as well as list out what resources are going to be listed in the SCERP that are in the community. So the next step, we're going to prepare. So the first step to preparing is establishing a planning team. So this is where the community comes together. The community leaders determine who should be involved in the planning team. And they're going to sit down, they're going to discuss the hazards. They're going to fill out the toolkit, which is a pretty easy to fill out Word document. And it asks for who is in the community, who's going to fill what leadership positions within the incident command structure, what resources, so whether they're airports, clinics, shelters, other lodging facilities that could be used as an alternate shelter, that kind of thing. So then you're going to send the toolkit into the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. We'll receive it, we'll develop the SCERP, we'll send it back to you, we'll have you review it, we'll have you review the map that's in there, send it back to us, tell us everything's good, or this needs to be changed, that needs to be changed. We'll review it, and then we'll distribute it, and we'll print it and distribute it. And then the next step is to get in touch with our exercise division and exercise the SCERP. So we're going to practice it. They'll develop a tabletop exercise. They can be virtual, they can be in person, but it's a scenario to run through, and to pull the SCERP out to go through, like, these are the people we would contact. This is where we would go for sheltering. And it really brings that community planning team together to discuss how the SCERP actually works for them. And then we're going to revise it. So we're going to do annual updates. So every year, as people move into different roles, move in and out of the community, that kind of thing, we're going to update the SCERP. So we don't want an outdated SCERP. We don't want to see something from 5 years ago that can't help the community with old information that's not really useful. So we want to do annual updates. And then every 3 years, we're going to do a complete revision. And so we'd sit down with the community planning team again and go through the SCERP start to finish, rather than just updating, different names or phone numbers here and there. So the planning team. So a successful planning team is going to have as many people as possible from community leadership in it, not just 1 or 2 people trying to plan for a whole community. Again, we're talking about communities up to 2,000 people. That can be quite a few people. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of knowledge within the community. So we're talking about city and village, council representatives, tribal administrators, clinic and health aides, VPSOs, fire, EMS, search and rescue, school principals. We often look at schools as shelters for communities. They're large enough to hold a significant number of people. They have showers, they have bathrooms, usually kitchen facilities. So we want to bring them in on it. IGAP coordinators, public utility managers, infrastructure, elder and youth representatives. So again, there's a lot of knowledge within the community. Also, we want to foster younger involvement from the youth, and bringing the youth in to get involved and take part in their community. And then the state's preparedness, public health nurses, they're a good source of information. We work closely with them in developing the SCERPs. And then also on here is AVEC. AVEC has a pretty large footprint within the state. So they are also a good resource. Within the incident command system, we have, it's broken down like a tree here. The incident commander is in charge of the incident. So there is one person in charge, one person running the show for the incident. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the mayor or whoever's in leadership within the community. They still need to be able to step up and fulfill their community leadership roles. So delegation of an incident commander is often good to somebody else who is a good leader within the community, but not necessarily the leader. So we're going to get contact information for all of these people. And again, all of these people could also be a few people, depending on the size of the community. Maybe it's a smaller community of 25 or 50 people, and there's just not that many people in the community who are willing or able to fill these roles. So maybe one person fills three or four roles. but we don't want to see one person filling all of these roles. And then this is scalable. So during an incident, if you find that you need more people to help coordinate the shelters, you could bring in more people to fill that role. Next slide. So this just briefly talks about the roles and responsibilities. Incident commander establishes the incident objectives, strategies, and priorities, and they do assume overall responsibility of the incident. Operations, they're going to determine the tactics and the resources for achieving the objectives, and then they're going to direct that response. So they know what needs to happen to do something, and then logistics would provide those. So for instance, if operations knows that they need a bulldozer for something, logistics would coordinate acquiring the bulldozer from whether it's somebody in the community or in a neighboring community, that kind of thing. Planning is going to collect and analyze the information. They're also going to track all those resources, and they're going to maintain the documentation. And then finally, finance and administration, all of this stuff has to get paid for somehow. So they're going to track the expenditures, claims, compensation. They're going to track people's hours that they put into helping manage the incident. And they're also going to coordinate payment for those resources. So this sounds like a lot as far as training goes, but there's really 4 basic classes that are free on the FEMA website. IS 100, 200, 700, and 800. And they go into a fair amount of depth on this, but also they're not overly complicated. They're easy to fill out. You don't have to travel to go to them. You can do them all online. They're pretty straightforward, and they do offer a little more information about how ICS is broken down and how it can be scalable and used for a variety of different kinds of incidents. There are some advanced ICS courses. These are all going to be in-person classes, and we are able to offer classes. If there's 15 or more people within a local jurisdiction and they've completed 100, 200, 7, and 8, you can contact the state training office, and I'll have that contact information at the end, and request a 300 or 400 level course. And those courses do show up fairly frequently around the state of Alaska. So once the incident happens, we're going to respond. We're going to implement this plan. And as we flip through the SCERP, we're going to see pages such as this one. So we would have what to do before the incident happens at 4 hours, 12 hours, 24, 48, and 72 hours. And as you can see, it's a pretty easy checklist to follow. It really just outlines the key things that leadership needs to focus on in order to manage the response for the incident. It's also going to have the contact information for all of the people that they need to contact. You can see on the right-hand side, this one's not filled out, but in a completed SCERP, it would have the name of, for instance, whoever the IC is, and then their phone number. Same with operations, safety, finance. And then as the need for other resources shows up, for instance, sheltering, getting in touch with the Red Cross, contacts like that are laid into the SCERP so that you can easily have those numbers at hand. The last thing you want to do during an incident is, when you're in a hurry to find something, have to go find it. So the SCERP is also going to discuss sheltering versus evacuation in a ready, set, go stage. So at ready, there's potential for evacuation. So if we know that there might be an incident that's coming, maybe we would put the community into a ready stage, just to kind of prepare them mentally, prepare them physically, maybe need to go, maybe not, but just be ready for it. Set, kind of one step up from that, actually have your go kit packed and make sure you have prescriptions. If you wear contact lenses, have extra contact lenses. Have any important documents ready to go, and know where they are, so that if you do need to leave at a moment's notice, you can just simply grab that one bag and walk out the door. And then go, obviously, grab your go kit, grab your family, grab your pets, and leave. So as we talk about sheltering, the SCERP does list out different shelters, primary, alternate shelters, and it will identify what those shelters are within the community. So including how many people it could house, are there restrooms available, are there showers, is there a kitchen facility, is there emergency power, and then are they ADA accessible? As not every shelter is going to have these, but this would allow you to quickly identify which shelters do. And then alternate shelter sites, these might be a shelter site in a neighboring community. So knowing that the next community over has something that may be able to house more people, or may have those extra features like kitchens, emergency power, ADA accessible, and moving the evacuating community over there. The Red Cross has more information on sheltering, and there's contact information there. So when we talk about evacuation, the SCERP includes a map that is, we work closely with the community to develop the map. It lists out their evacuation routes, and also lists out the shelters. It lists clinics, the emergency operations center, so where all of the incident command staff would come together and to manage the disaster. That has to be in a location. So all of this is within the SCERP, and so there are 7 copies of the SCERP in the community. So you would be able to know, if you didn't have, if there was only one copy, it would be difficult to get that information out to the other members in leadership role. But with 7, it's widely distributed. So it also lists the airports, and then runway size, and like what the largest aircraft is that can fly into that. It will talk about returning back to the community, because eventually the community wants to come back once the disaster has been responded to and managed. The SCERP also talks about medical facilities, clinics, for, again, primary and alternate. One community may not have the same resources that another does. And so knowing where the nearest medical facility is helpful. There's a damage assessment. So this is useful for management, for the incident command team to go through the community and inventory, identify what the damage is to the community. So we're not just looking at like public buildings and roads. We also want to know what the businesses are that have been damaged and how bad they are. More importantly, we want to know the homes and how bad is the damage, how many people are going to need to be sheltered, are people going to be able to return to their home, that kind of thing. So the next page in the SCERP is going to be a sample disaster declaration. So as the community has extended its resources and exceeded them, they're going to look for help. And so they're going to come to the state or the borough and request some additional assistance, whether it's financially, maybe they need people on the ground, maybe they need building supplies to rebuild their homes, that kind of thing. Maybe they need food or sandbags or whatever. So they're going to request assistance. So this is an example of a disaster declaration that would be sent to the state. And then again, I mentioned contact information within the SCERP. At the end of it is there are several different lists of contact information. So borough and regional contact information. If there's a borough emergency manager, that is in there. The regional health corporation, school districts, Coast Guard. A lot of these numbers are numbers that you could find if you had the time to look it up, or you know, if you had the internet access. Maybe you don't have internet access because of the disaster, and so it's difficult to look up the phone numbers for the school district or the Coast Guard. And then the state and federal contact information, Department of Health, Department of Environmental Conservation. If you need to report a spill, maybe there was a fuel spill, that number might not be easy to find. So that is listed in there. Maybe need to report some damage to the airstrip to DOT. So we have contact information for all of that. The state troopers, for the nearest post for the state troopers, a little bit easier maybe than calling 911 to get routed through the system. The National Weather Service, and then again, I mentioned the Red Cross to discuss sheltering. So we're at the recovery stage of the incident. If a disaster has been declared by the governor or the president, in the case of a federal disaster, that opens up a couple of different avenues for getting financial assistance. We have public assistance, and those grants are applicable to public infrastructure. So roads, public buildings, fences, sewage lagoons, water control facilities, all that kind of stuff. And so that is city and village owned. So any public infrastructure. And then we also have individual assistance, and those grants pertain directly to the individuals. So we have the individual and family grant that covers housing, personal property, transportation, medical, dental, and funeral costs. And then there's also the temporary housing grant, which will help cover rental assistance to repair or rebuild if you own a home. So then lastly, we're going to adapt our plan. And so now that we've been through the incident, we've utilized the SCERP, we know the areas that it did really well in for us. And then we also know the areas that, you know, maybe we did leave out a phone number or two that were difficult to get a hold of. So we're going to go through and we're going to adapt the plan. We're going to update it. The other thing we're going to do is contact the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management's exercise team. And they're going to put together a tabletop exercise, and we can go over different kinds of scenarios. Maybe the SCERP worked really well for a wildfire incident, but we don't know how it would work for a tsunami or for community flooding. So we're going to work with the exercise team to develop other tabletop exercises to help us go through it. We have the outreach team. Michelle heads up the CERT training. We have the earthquake simulator that'll travel around the state and help do education on how to react during an earthquake. And then we have various preparedness classes that they put together. Our training team, as I mentioned, the ICS courses, 100, 200, 7 and 8, those are all online. Those are all fairly easy to get accomplished on your own. But the more advanced courses need to have an actual instructor. And so the training team over there, Jeff and Eva, they can help walk you through those. They can help coordinate putting together an ICS 300 or 400 course. And if you have any questions about the 1, 2, 7, and 800, as far as getting signed into the ACADIS portal and the FEMA website. They're more than happy to help walk people through how to do all that. And then the mitigation team, they handle all of our FEMA mitigation grants. What else does DHS and EM offer? So again, we have our planning section. We put on various workshops. We have a rural resilience workshop coming up in Anchorage in March. We have a tsunami operations workshop in Kodiak coming up in March. We have a couple other workshops we're starting to talk about for later on in the year. Trying to get out in the communities, engage the communities, and work to come together from a state side to work with the communities and really build a more resilient Alaska. Our preparedness education, I mentioned the FEMA and ICS training, CERT, preparedness outreach. Again, they're same kind of thing. We're trying to be engaged with the communities in them and really educate as many people as possible. Our operations branch, once a disaster happens, they are the boots on the ground. They are physically there, laying eyes on the disaster, assessing it, and then also staffing the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and being somebody on this side of things that can help walk you through the disaster. There's somebody on the other side of the phone at all times. More than happy to answer any questions, to direct any phone calls. Definitely very helpful. And then we have the disaster assistance branch that covers the public assistance and individual assistance and the grant management within those. And then at this time, I'm going to open it up for questions. You can always reach out to me with any questions. I'm happy to work with everybody as far as coordinating, putting together a SCERP, and happy to work with people to connect with exercises and training, and we can get the communities trained up to the best that they can be, and through the FEMA training, and then also to practice the SCERPs and to put them into play. I did include the SCOC number on here. That is a good catch-all number, and especially in the event of a disaster. Throughout the SCERP, that SCOC number is in there. You'll see almost every page that number is on there as somebody to check in with and to request more information, more resources. So.
And then, yeah, Mackenzie, thank you. Mackenzie's on top of it, the recording. We're really pleased to welcome JoAnn Scordino with FEMA Region 9 to talk about tribal hazard mitigation plans. So JoAnn, take it away.
Take myself off of mute. Good morning, Karen. Should I put up the PowerPoint or will you?
Do you have a preference? Yeah, you're welcome to put it up if it's easier for you to manage. Why?
It's not, but let's see who can get it up the fair.
Okay, let me, I think I can, let me try and share it on my end and see if that, I just want to make sure I have the correct, this one, JoAnn.
Oh,
sorry.
Let me unshare.
Is this looking good or?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you so much. Give me just 1 second here. All right. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, JoAnn, this is Karen. Yeah, can see you and see
okay,
the presentation.
and hear me. All right, good. Good morning. I'm JoAnn Scordino with FEMA Region 9, based out of California, the Oakland area. And I'll be presenting today with my colleague, Jesse Johnson, who will be speaking about our grants program. So next slide, please. Real quickly, I work in mitigation as one of the community planners, and we oversee and review the hazard mitigation plans. So a very quick overview of mitigation planning. Most important, if any of you have produced a hazard mitigation plan or been on a team, or if you haven't, this is just a very quick overview. The most important part is to put together a good, solid planning team, key members of your tribal community that can help you through the planning process in developing and or updating your hazard mitigation plan. In the plan, you will identify your top natural hazards for your tribal lands and community and identify ways, what the risks are and how to reduce those risks. So it's I think it's very natural for tribal communities to be in touch with and engaged with our earth and see how things evolve. The plan just gives you an opportunity to kind of create a roadmap where you can then look to see what your current hazards are and a plan of action over the next 5 years, how you're going to potentially reduce some of the hazards. And that helps with creating goals, strategies, and having mitigation actions or potential projects for each top hazard. And then the next key piece is really implementing your plan. Once your plan's been written and approved, we want to see over that 5-year period that you have a plan for how you're going to keep it alive and keep those actions moving forward. So if you look at the mitigation plan as kind of a natural evolution of over a 5-year period of just having a plan of action, how you're going to keep your lands, your people, and your sacred sites and as safe as possible. Next slide. So as I just mentioned, once your plan is approved for a 5-year period, that's when the whole planning process or the implementation process begins. And it's the opportunity to bring those actions to the forefront and, breathe life into your plan. Also, your plan should be updated at least every 5 years to keep your tribe eligible for FEMA grant assistance and post-disaster assistance. We're getting more and more disasters or declared disasters, unfortunately, for the disasters. But if you don't have an approved hazard mitigation plan, very different from what John spoke about with the SCERP. With the hazard mitigation plan, it does need to be approved for FEMA grant eligibility and disaster assistance. Next slide. So when you're in that 5-year period, you want to look ahead and see if your next plan update, if you're going to do it as a standalone, your own community standalone tribal plan, or if you might want to go in and partner with your plan with the local county. In California, we had 5 tribes that did a multi-jurisdictional tribal plan. So they partnered on the planning process. Completely up to you. You may choose to keep doing what you've been doing or change course and partner for your next plan update. Also, make sure you integrate the aspects of your hazard mitigation plan with your other tribal plans, your emergency operations plan, your environmental plan, your general plan, the different plans you have within your tribal community. Make sure that pieces of the mitigation plan fit into those other plans and vice versa. So they're working in conjunction with one another and not in opposing, with opposing purposes and strategies. After this slide, I'll give you some links which you can access, but continue to use the guides and resources available for writing or updating a hazard mitigation plan. They've got everything laid out step by step. Some documents are way more government-ese and difficult to understand. We have the tribal mitigation, hazard mitigation handbook, which is way more user-friendly. And I highly recommend that, and the link is on the next page. Keep your planning team, your stakeholder group, and your public, whoever you identify your public to be. That could be your tribal members only. That could be people who frequent your different businesses, such as casinos. So keep your planning team, stakeholder group, and public engaged throughout that 5-year process. And then last but not least, and this is leading up to Jesse's presentation next, identify resources and funding for the most important projects or actions you've identified. Once you have an approved hazard mitigation plan, that opens the door, at least from FEMA. There are many other funding resources, but within FEMA, having that approved hazard mitigation plan really opens the door for funding, grant funding, and opportunities to make your environment, your lands, and protect your people best. So keep that in mind. Next slide. Thank you. Back one. Thank you. Mitigation planning resources. So there's the tribal mitigation review guide. there's the handbook, which I just mentioned, which is a takeoff of the review guide, but in a much more user-friendly way and with more examples and resources. There's a fact sheet. You can contact us for the Region 9 Tribal Review Tool, which you would use to submit your plan for review. And then there's an older version of the Mitigation Ideas booklet and our grants website. That's what I have to share today. Next will be Jesse Johnson speaking about our mitigation BRIC grant program.
Great. Thanks so much, JoAnn. And maybe we can take questions after Jesse talks and kind of both together. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
yeah, Jesse, passing the baton over to you. Thank you. And Jesse, you may be on mute if you are talking. Yeah, Jesse, for some reason, at least on my end, I'm still not hearing you. I see that you're talking.
Jesse.
Yeah, it looks like you're not muted. Huh.
He's going to try his headphones.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks. That's great.
I hope he's able to talk because he knows the grant program way better than I do.
Oh, I see. Oh, thanks. Oh, and yes, Amelia, thank you for your chat message. Yeah, we'll get the links in JoAnn's slide to everyone. So thank you for that.
You know, Karen, it asked me if I wanted to be unmuted and I was muted, but that shouldn't impact Jesse, right?
I don't think so. It's weird because on my end, Jesse, you look unmuted.
Let's see, test. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yay. Yes.
Oh, yay, the microphone worked.
You're coming through loud and clear. Thank you.
Awesome. Technology, you know, when it works when it wants to. It's got a mind of its own most of the time.
Very much so. Well, glad we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everybody. Jesse Johnson here, FEMA Region 9. Same office as JoAnn. I am the Grants Management Specialist under the Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities Grant Program. And I am the tribal point of contact here in Region 9 for that grant program. So it's nice to see everyone today, and I'm happy to be here. Kind of wanted to start off, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Karen, thank you, with just sort of integrating the idea and the purpose and focus of today's meeting with the fact that there's, you know, emergency, you have mitigation is kind of the starting point of emergency response, if you will. Having a mitigation plan is a great opportunity to identify your hazards. And in identifying your hazards, what mitigation opportunities are there to put in place projects that will help minimize the effects of any disasters from happening. And a great place to start with that is this Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities program, also known as BRIC. So from your plan, let's say that maybe you don't have a plan or the community doesn't have a mitigation plan. Well, BRIC can help fund that given if the lack thereof the capability and capacity to do so. So if you're able to apply for a BRIC application to create a plan, that's a great start. So what BRIC does, unfortunately, we are just a couple of days past the BRIC open application period, which ended on January 27th. And likely the new application period would open sometime in September of this year, 23, for the fiscal year 2023. And this year is going to be the fiscal year 2022. But what BRIC is going to do is it's going to incentivize your natural hazard risk reduction activities, and it's going to mitigate, have opportunities to mitigate public infrastructure. And then the factor to it is just your disadvantaged communities, as referenced in Executive Order 14008. That goes into a long definition, and that could be a whole nother meeting to explain. So I won't go too much into the economically disadvantaged and rural communities program just yet. So what you also want to do is try and incorporate nature-based solutions. That's really great opportunity for tribes to keep their lands in its natural state while mitigating the effects of any types of natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, retrofitting your infrastructures, or storm damage. It's also going to include design to reduce carbon emissions. Things that come to idea, projects that come to idea when it comes to reducing carbon emissions are things such as microgrid systems and things of that nature. These are all opportunities to apply for BRIC funding to fund those types of projects as identified in your hazard mitigation plan. It's also going to enhance your climate resilience and adaptation. So if you want to apply for different projects that are going to address certain climate resiliency as it pertains to the tribal lands, and what adaptation opportunities there are to climate change. That's one of the main focuses there, or purposes, if you will, for the BRIC program. It's also going to increase funding to applicants to facilitate the adoption and enforcement of the newest editions of building codes. So that's a capability and capacity building or planning portion of BRIC funding to adopt, help your community to adopt building codes to become more resilient for your infrastructure resiliency. So again, BRIC is going to encourage building resilient infrastructures in communities, trying to spell out the acronym as I go along as much as possible. It also wants to encourage mitigation projects that are going to meet multiple program priorities. Okay, next slide, please. So I highlighted a little bit of information here on these slides, just to kind of cover the fiscal year 2022 program, because a lot of it, there were some changes in the funding. Some of the changes for that funding was that the state and territory, well, I'll skip that part. But anyways, it increased from $1 to $2 million. But as it pertains to the tribal set-aside, the tribal set-aside increased from 25 million to $50 million, which is a significant increase. So pretty much everything within the BRIC program doubled or increased. There's also a combined application for capability and capacity buildings. It increased from $1 million to $2 million. That includes your mitigation planning. As I mentioned, if you don't have a mitigation plan and you want to write a mitigation plan but don't have the capability or capacity, you can get that funding. You can apply for the funding to create your mitigation plan and or your other planning related activities. For example, your certain, as it's stated, C and CB or capability and capacity activities could include your hazard mitigation planning and or other planning related activities, creating partnerships, adopting building codes, as I previously mentioned. It states there that applicants must still have a hazard mitigation to apply, and that part kind of really threw me off. But of course, my common sense really told me to look into it a little bit more. And essentially, if you don't have a hazard mitigation plan and you're applying to create a new hazard mitigation plan, that funding is available and would be under that $2 million for the capability and capacity building funding. Next slide, please. So in total, the BRIC funding that's available is a whopping $2.2 1.95, almost $2.3 billion. That's billion with a B, as you see it there. That is a lot of money that's out there to go and get and have the opportunity to utilize and build your resiliency for your community. Again, the tribal set aside is $50 million. Let's see, the tribal set aside also can be used again for capability and capacity buildings. And essentially what that means is that up to $2 million or not to exceed the $2 million per applicant is for those capability and capacity building activities. Sorry if I can get the acronym spelled out correctly. So up to $1 million. Now, up to $1 million will actually you'll be able to utilize for your planning related activities, and that's per applicant. Okay. Let's see here. So any funds that are not awarded, I wanted to mention this part because it's really important that we get as many communities and especially the tribal communities to apply as possible, because any funding that is not allocated from the set aside goes back into the national competition, and that's for both tribes, states, and territories. Any funding, again, that's not awarded under that allocation or that set aside goes back into the national competition. And essentially what that means is that if there are projects out there that are overfunded or there may not be enough funding for, if that money goes back into the pot, then that funding becomes available to those communities who may not have been eligible to receive the full amount prior. It's a long process and takes another bit of explaining, but we'll get into that maybe at another meeting or if we're all in person, and I'll take questions to that as well. So next slide, please. Another important item that I've noticed after my year of being here is that last year from the tribal applications, there were 0 applicants that applied for management costs. To me, the way I want to throw it out there is that management costs can be funded up to 100%. And it's free money. It's 100% management costs for sub-applications, and tribes that apply essentially as the applicant and are the sub-applicant, so long as they're not applying through the state. To apply through the state, then you become a sub-applicant. And again, I'm going back here to where it says you must have a approved tribal hazard mitigation plan by application deadline. And that is, I wanted to point out, for your projects that you're applying for. So if you don't have a plan, you want to apply for a BRIC funding, you can apply to create your plan. And then from there, you can go ahead and apply for the projects that are addressed in your hazard mitigation plan. Let's see here. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So that rolls me into another opportunity, which is non-financial direct technical assistance. Let's say that you don't have the capability or capacity to create a plan. Well, this new opportunity of technical assistance that you can apply for, that is much easier for applying for than a grant is, or at least the BRIC grant is to apply for the direct technical assistance. And essentially what it is a questionnaire that you go in, you click the button, and you fill out some community information, what the community's needs are, identify if you want to create a plan, if from that plan you want to create some projects, if you want to identify some, see if I can say this properly, it's called an H&H study, the hydraulic and hydrologic studies of the lands to create plans and mitigation projects from that study. Direct technical assistance is provided by FEMA and the DTA providers, which will give you the hand-holding experience to walk you through the process from plan development to grant application, through the grant application period, all the way through grant closeout. And some of these more specific items here that DTA providers will assist with are not only from the regional project coordinators if you will, for lack of a better explanation. But the subject matter experts within FEMA, and if FEMA may not have those subject matter experts, can look to our partners at a contractor, if you will, yeah, probably a contractor that we could go out to and look for and seek assistance with bringing them into the community and giving that subject matter expertise on whatever the subject or mitigation project is. So what they'll do is the DTA providers can assist with developing the timelines of resource planning, identification, communication, and convening of mitigation stakeholders, bringing in your community together and put together a plan on how to, when to meet in order to discuss your plan and your hazards at risk. Develop or update, again, your hazard risk assessments, and they can identify those and get the more specific details from those assessments to identify the information that's needed to input into your plan, your hazard mitigation plan. And also development of the grant applications, including your benefit cost analysis, which for a project is a requirement to have it at some point. Again, that is a little more in-depth detail for how to get to that benefit cost analysis and how it applies when applying for the grant. But the development of the grant applications is essentially getting you to understand how to develop that application and pretty much do everything for you except write the grant for you or write the plan for you, for that matter. And also identify possible relevant grant opportunities. So other grant opportunities outside of Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities program. And a little more specifically for what they may be able to, the DTA, direct technical assistance providers, may facilitate, our review of your process of existing efforts related to a project or planning or information that may be currently available, or identify other mitigation projects outside of an existing plan. There's also prioritization assistance with mitigation projects on the conceptualization of projects. In other words, getting them together and making sure that they're carried out and completed. So there's also, again, feasibility requirements. So doing feasibility studies of different projects. And then also there's engineering design that they can assist with. So if there's engineering or upsizing a culvert, a drainage culvert, we can bring in our engineers to look at that project and identify, is it a 5-year, 10-year, 50-year, 100-year, 500-year flood? And is this culvert going to withstand that magnitude of water flow during the rainy periods? And if not, what would actually work? And also explore the ideas of what natural mitigation projects would work. Also, they can provide training on hazard mitigation grant application development, and that one-on-one, again, hand-holding experience to anyone that is, may not have the knowledge of how to apply for a grant. It's really great. We've already worked with 2 communities, tribal communities here in Region 9, and also one, I believe, other local community for FY21 that we're working with and helping them develop and identify projects. And one tribal community we were actually able to get them not only to identify the hazards that they had of concern, but come up with an actual projects to apply for, and they were able to apply this round, FY 2022, for the Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities for 2 projects. One project scoping project and another actual project of upsizing a culvert on the reservation, which is great, and it's a great opportunity. And I look forward to reviewing these applications and getting the ideas of how to utilize the mitigation projects that I see and share them with others and the ideas and the ones that do work and go through. So next slide, please. And here's our contact information. You have the general email for mitigation planners. You've got my email and contact information, JoAnn, and Jocelyn Madison Kelly, who is actually the Tribal Hazard Mitigation Grant Program Post-Disaster Grants point of contact. So anything not related to pre-disaster mitigation, this is post-disaster mitigation. Jocelyn Madison Kelly would be your point of contact for Region 9. At this juncture, I will open it up for questions or comments, Karen, if you'd like.
Jesse or Joe.